The first time I learned my son had put my house up for sale, I was sitting in a rehabilitation clinic with an ice pack strapped around my knee. I had spent 6 weeks learning how to bend that knee again after surgery. 6 weeks counting my steps with a walker. 6 weeks being told that healing did not happen because you wanted it to happen faster. Then my phone rang. The woman on the other end introduced herself as Dana Pierce, a title clerk from a company I had never heard of. Her voice was careful, almost too careful. "Mrs. Clark," she said, "before we move any further, I need to confirm that you approved the sale of your residence at 214 Willow Lane." For a moment, I thought she had the wrong person. "My residence?" I asked. "Yes, Mom. The home in Willow Creek. Your son, Michael Clark, is listed as the family contact. We received a purchase agreement yesterday." I looked through the therapy room window at the March rain sliding down the glass. "There is no sale." I told her, "That is my house. I have not signed anything." The silence on the line lasted just long enough to make my stomach turn. Then Dana lowered her voice. "Mrs. Clark, I'm glad I called. Because the signature on the seller documents did not look consistent with the signature we have on your earlier property records." That was the moment I understood. This was not a misunderstanding between a mother and her son. It was a plan. If you believe a parent deserves to control her own home, subscribe to this channel and tell me in the comments, what would you do first if you discovered someone in your family had tried to sell your house behind your back? My name is Rebecca Clark. I was 68 years old that spring. Avidov, a former library assistant, and the only legal owner of a modest white brick house at the end of Willow Lane. My husband William and I had bought that house 34 years earlier, when our son Michael was still young enough to leave his baseball glove in the driveway and expect one of us to move it before the rain came. It was not a grand house. It had 3 bedrooms, a narrow front porch, and a maple tree William planted during the first year we lived there. The kitchen cabinets were older than some of my neighbors. The hardwood floors creaked in the hallway. The laundry room was too small. The guest bathroom had always been a little cold, and the upstairs window stuck whenever the weather changed. But every inch of that house belonged to a life we had built carefully. William worked maintenance at the county courthouse. I worked at the Willow Creek Public Library for 27 years. We never had much extra money, but we had a system. We packed lunches. We fixed things before replacing them. We took one affordable vacation every summer, usually somewhere with a lake and a little motel room that smelled like coffee. When Michael needed braces, we found the money. When he wanted to attend a state college 2 hours away, we found more. When William got sick years later, I sat at the kitchen table with a yellow legal pad and found ways to keep up with the mortgage, the prescriptions, and the heating bill without letting him see how scared I was. By the time William passed away, the mortgage was paid off. That house became more than property after that. It became proof that I had survived something I never wanted to survive. I did not want to leave it. I did not want to sell it. And I certainly had not authorized my son to put it on the market while I was recovering from surgery. But Michael had always known how to make his wishes sound like concern. That was his talent. He did not come into a room shouting. He came in carrying groceries. He asked whether I had taken my medication. He noticed if a light bulb was out. He called me Mom. In that soft voice he had learned as a little boy, when he wanted forgiveness, before he had even admitted what he had done. After William died, Michael became more involved in my life. At first, I appreciated it. He would stop by after work with takeout from the diner. He would mow the lawn when the grass got high. He installed a new smoke detector in the hallway and told me he did not like the thought of me living alone. His wife, Lorraine, came less often. She was polite, but her politeness had a sharp edge to it. She asked questions that sounded casual and never were. Do you still have all the property paperwork somewhere? Have you thought about downsizing? Wouldn't a condo be easier when you're older? I always gave the same answer. This house works for me. Lauren would smile, but her eyes would move around the room as if she were calculating where a new couch might go. Their financial situation had been unstable for a while. Michael had worked in commercial sales for years, but his company had cut his position the previous fall. He found another job, though it paid less. Lauren had been trying to grow an online boutique business that seemed to require more money than it ever earned. They rented a townhouse across town with their 14-year-old daughter, Emma. I knew things were tight. I had helped them before. When Michael's car transmission failed, I loaned him $3,000. When Emma needed a laptop for school, I bought it. When their rent increased, I paid for their groceries for 2 months. I did those things because I loved them. I did not keep score. But I began to notice that Michael had stopped asking for help in the old way. He no longer said, "Mom, I'm embarrassed to ask." Instead, he spoke as if my help was a practical arrangement we all understood. You have more room in your budget than we do. You don't need all that money sitting there. Dad would want you to help us get ahead. The first time he said that last sentence, I felt something in me stiffen. William had wanted Michael to be responsible. That was not the same thing as wanting me to sacrifice my independence whenever our son made a bad decision. Still, I did not confront him then. That was one of my weaknesses. I had spent my whole life smoothing over tension before it became a conflict. At the library, I could calm an angry patron without raising my voice. At home, I had learned how to redirect an argument before William and Michael said things they could not take back. Sometimes peace is a gift. Sometimes it is simply the name we give to silence. My knee surgery happened in January. The doctor had recommended it for nearly a year. Arthritis had turned simple movements into negotiations. Going down the porch steps hurt. Standing long enough to cook dinner hurt. I had started planning my grocery trips around how far I would have to walk. Michael insisted he would help. You're not doing this alone, he told me at the hospital. Lauren and I will make sure the house is handled while you're in rehab. I remember feeling grateful. I had no reason not to. Before I left for the procedure, I gave Michael a spare key. He already had one, but he claimed he could not find it. I also gave him the folder where I kept my insurance information and utility account numbers, because he said he would make sure the bills were paid on time. I did not give him my deed. I did not give him permission to access my bank account. And I never signed a power of attorney. But after surgery, I was tired. Pain medication made the days blur together. The rehabilitation center had a strict schedule. Breakfast at 7. Exercises at 9. More exercises after lunch. Ice packs. Medication. Short walks down the corridor. While someone reminded me to stand straight. Michael visited 3 or 4 times a week during the first month. He brought flowers once. He brought Emma twice. He brought paperwork once. That should have bothered me. I was sitting in a wheelchair near the window when he placed a manila envelope on the tray in front of me. Nothing serious, he said. Just some forms so I can talk to the insurance company and handle things at the house. I looked down at the papers. There were several pages with small print and yellow tabs where I was supposed to sign. What kind of forms? Medical release paperwork. Utility authorization. Basic stuff. I picked up the first page. The letters moved slightly because my glasses were on the bedside table, not on my face. Why do you need to talk to the insurance company? Because you're in rehab. Mom? I'm trying to help. The words were reasonable. His tone was reasonable. But something about the way he kept one hand on the envelope made me pause. I'll read them later, I said. His expression changed for half a second. Not anger. something smaller and colder. Mum, you don't need to make this difficult. I'm not making anything difficult. I'm not signing papers I haven't read. He gave a short laugh. You always assume the worst. No, I said. I assume I should understand what I sign. He gathered the envelope, a little too quickly. Fine, I'll bring them back when you're less tired. He never brought them back. At the time, I felt uneasy. But I let myself accept his explanation because I wanted to believe my son was frustrated, not deceptive. A mother can talk herself out of almost any warning if the alternative is believing her child might truly mean her harm. The call from Dana Pierce changed that. I asked her to tell me exactly what she had received. She was hesitant at first. She explained that she could not disclose every detail before confirming my identity. So I answered her questions. My address, my date of birth, the last 4 digits of my social security number. Then she spoke plainly. A real estate agent named Brent Harlow had submitted a listing agreement for my house. There was a proposed sale price of $285,000. A buyer had already made an offer. The file included copies of my driver's license, an affidavit claiming I was temporarily unable to manage my affairs after surgery, and documents that appeared to authorize Michael to act for me. Did you give your son power of attorney? Dana asked. No. Did you sign anything before surgery? Nothing about my home. Her voice softened. Then I need you to call an attorney immediately. I have placed a hold on the file, but I need something in writing from you. And Mrs. Clark? Yes? Please do not discuss the details with anyone who may be involved until you have secured your documents. After we hung up, I sat there with my phone in my lap and listened to the soft mechanical hiss of the rehab center's air vents. I was not a woman who screamed when she was frightened. I became quiet. Quiet was how I had survived Williams Hospital nights. Quiet was how I had made decisions when there was not enough money and too much uncertainty. Quiet was how I kept my hands steady. I called my neighbor, Evelyn Brooks. Evelyn had lived across the street from me for almost 20 years. She was 69, retired from the county clerk's office, and more observant than any security camera. She had watered my porch plants while I was recovering. She had a key, but she only used it when I asked. When she answered, I told her I needed a favor. Can you go over to my house? I asked. Don't go inside if anyone is there. Just tell me if you see anything unusual. There was a pause. Rebecca, she said. What is going on? I'm not sure yet. Evelyn did not press. That was one of the reasons I trusted her. 20 minutes later, she called back. I see a real estate sign in your yard. I closed my eyes. What kind of sign? A for sale sign. Brent Harlow Realty. For a moment, I could not speak. Evelyn kept talking, her voice tighter now. And there are flyers in one of those clear boxes. I saw a couple standing on your porch looking in through the front windows. My chest felt hollow. That is my house, I whispered. I know it is. I never agreed to this. I know that too. Then Evelyn said something that made my blood run cold. Rebecca, there's another thing. Your front door is unlocked, and Michael's truck is parked in your driveway. I did not know then that Michael had been in my house for 3 hours that afternoon. I did not know he had opened my filing cabinet in the back bedroom. I did not know he had already told a real estate agent that I was too confused after surgery to make decisions for myself. And I did not know that the paperwork Dana had questioned was only the beginning. Because while I was sitting in rehab, trying to learn how to walk without pain, my son was not simply trying to sell my house. He was trying to make it look as though I had willingly given him the right to take it. Evelyn stayed on the phone with me while I called. The only attorney I knew well enough to trust without hesitation. Her name was Claire Mendez. Years earlier, Claire had helped William and me update our wills after he retired. She was not the kind of lawyer who spoke in dramatic courtroom phrases. She spoke slowly, took careful notes, and never made promises she could not keep. When her receptionist answered, I said, "Please tell Miss Mendez it's Rebecca Clark. I think someone is trying to sell my house." Claire called me back within 15 minutes. I told her everything. The title clerk, the listing, Michael's truck at my house, the unsigned forms he had brought to rehab, the claim that I was somehow unable to manage my own affairs. She did not interrupt me once. When I finished, she said, "Rebecca, I need you to listen carefully. First, do not confront Michael alone. Second, do not sign anything he brings you. Third, I want you to call the title clerk back and ask her to send all documents directly to my office. If she has paused the closing file, we have time." "Is he really able to sell my house?" I asked. "No," Claire said. "Not if you did not authorize him. But if he has used forged documents, we need to stop the transaction before anyone moves money or takes possession." Her answer should have reassured me. Instead, it frightened me more. Because Michael had not simply made a foolish decision. He had prepared documents. He had contacted an agent. He had shown strangers my home. He had done all of that while visiting me in rehab and telling me he was making sure I had nothing to worry about. Claire asked whether I had my deed. "It should be in a blue fireproof box in the back bedroom closet." I said, Evelyn was still at my house. I asked her to check. A few minutes later, she called back from my bedroom. "The box is here," she said. "But Rebecca, it's open." My mouth went dry. "Is the deed inside?" "I see old tax papers. Your will folder. Insurance forms." She paused. "But I don't see the deed." I closed my eyes. William had bought that blue box after a kitchen fire in our first apartment. It was one of those purchases he had researched for days, comparing prices and reading labels under his breath. The box had followed us through 3 decades of birthdays, bills, graduations, illnesses, and funerals. Michael knew exactly where it was. "Evian," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Please lock the box. Then take photographs of the closet, the open box, and anything that looks disturbed. Don't touch anything else." "I already have my phone out," she said. That was Evelyn. Never loud. Never panicked. Just practical. Claire told me to ask the rehabilitation center for written documentation of my condition and schedule. She needed proof that I had been living under supervised care at the times the supposed seller documents had been signed. "Not because you are incapable," she explained, "but because their timeline matters. If he claims you met with a notary at your home on a day you were in physical therapy here, that contradiction is important." After I hung up, I asked the nurse at the desk for the facility administrator. Her name was Sheila Grant. She had kind eyes and a voice that carried authority, without needing to rise. I had seen her handle difficult families before. There was no confusion in the way she listened when I explained what might have happened. "Mrs. Clark," she said, "we can provide records of your therapy appointments and visitors. But if anyone came here asking you to sign legal paperwork, I need to know." "My son brought documents," I said. "I did not sign them." Sheila's expression tightened. "Do you remember the date?" I did. It had been the afternoon after my first unassisted walk down the hallway. I remembered because Michael had congratulated me, then placed that envelope in front of me as though he had been waiting for me to feel weak enough to say yes. Sheila checked the visitor log. Michael had signed in at 2:08 that afternoon. He had signed out at 2:41. Then she pulled up a security camera image from the hallway outside my room. It showed him leaving with the manila envelope still tucked under his arm. "You did the right thing by not signing," she said. I looked at the grainy image on her screen. Michael's head was bowed as he walked away. He looked like a son visiting his mother, like a man carrying paperwork for someone who needed help. But I knew what I was seeing now. He had come to get my signature. When he could not get it, he had found another way to create one. That evening, Dana from the title company sent the documents to Claire's office. Claire came to see me the next morning, with a thick folder under her arm. She sat beside my bed and spread the papers across the small rolling table. I had always hated looking at legal documents. The language seemed designed to make ordinary people feel foolish. But Claire walked me through every page. The first document was a listing agreement. It showed my name as the seller and Michael as my attorney in fact. The signature under my name looked like mine at a quick glance. But it was not mine. My real signature began with a slightly uneven R. It always had. I learned cursive in a crowded classroom in 1965, and I had carried that habit through every check, birthday card, and library form I had ever signed. The signature on the listing agreement began with a loop that was too tall. The letters were pressed too hard into the page, and my last name was missing. The small, upward flick I always made at the end of the K. Claire pointed to it with a pen. "This may look small," she said. "It is not small." The next document was worse. It was a durable power of attorney naming Michael as my agent. The document claimed I had signed it in front of a notary named Harold Bennett 4 months earlier. In November. I had not signed a power of attorney in November. In November, I had been helping Evelyn prepare Thanksgiving dinner because her sister had the flu. I remembered that week clearly. Michael and Lauren had come late, and Michael spent half the meal complaining about money. He had said his new job was temporary. Lauren had said they were considering moving somewhere cheaper. Then she had looked at my living room and said, "This house could solve a lot of problems for everyone." At the time, I thought she was speaking carelessly. Now I understood she had been testing the idea out loud. Claire turned to the notary page. "There is an issue here," she said. "What kind of issue?" "The seal number is incomplete." I stared at her. "The notary stamp shows a commission number," she continued. "But the number does not match the public record for a Harold Bennett in this county. There is a notary with that name, but his commission expired last summer." I felt a strange, painful relief. Not because the documents existed, because there was finally something solid. A lie has a way of making you question yourself. It invites you to argue about tone, and ton, family history, and hurt feelings. But records do not care who feels offended. A date is a date. A commission is active or it is not. A person signs a document or does not. Claire looked at me carefully. "Rebecca, I cannot tell you yet who prepared these papers. But this gives us grounds to challenge everything immediately." She called Dana while I listened. Dana confirmed that she had already informed the real estate agent the file was on hold. The prospective buyers had been told there was a title issue. No closing could happen until the issue was resolved. For the first time since that phone call, I could breathe all the way in. Then Dana added something else. "Miss Mendez," she said, "there is another concern. The buyer's earnest money deposit was submitted through a company called Willow Crest Holdings." Claire's face changed. "Is that the buyer?" "No. The buyer is a married couple, Daniel and Priya Ross. Willow Crest appears to be a private lender connected to the transaction." "Connected how?" "They sent a request for preliminary title confirmation before the offer was accepted. It is unusual for a buyer's side to move that quickly." Claire thanked her and ended the call. "What does that mean?" I asked. "It may mean Michael had more than a buyer," she said. "It may mean he had a financial arrangement waiting for this sale to go through." The words settled over me like cold rain. Michael was not trying to move me into a smaller apartment, so I would be safer. He was not trying to simplify my life while I recovered. Someone expected money from my house. That afternoon, Claire sent an emergency letter to the title company, the real estate brokerage, and the county recorder's office. She stated clearly that I had not authorized a sale. I had never signed a power of attorney, and disputed the documents being used in my name. She also filed an affidavit with the county recorder, alerting any future lender or buyer that ownership and authority were contested. It doesn't solve everything, she told me, but it puts a bright flag on the property. Anyone who looks at the record will see there is a dispute. I thought of Michael's truck in my driveway. Can he still get into my house? Does he have a key? Yes. Then we change the locks as soon as you are safely able to return home. Until then, I want someone you trust to check the property. We may also want to have the police document the situation, especially if important records are missing. The police officer who came was named Marcus Reed. He was patient but cautious, as officers often are, when a family conflict has not yet become a formal criminal case. He met Evelyn at my house, photographed the open fireproof box, and made a report about the missing deed and possible fraudulent property documents. He did not search the house. He did not arrest anyone. He did not promise justice by sunset. He simply documented what was there. At first, I wanted more. I wanted someone to knock on Michael's door and demand that he explain himself. I wanted the whole terrible thing to be stopped by an official voice. I wanted a stranger in a uniform to restore the order my own son had violated. But Officer Reed said something I would remember. Mrs. Clark, paper crimes take time. Preserve every document. Preserve every message. The more we can show, the clearer the picture becomes. The next day, Michael called me. I saw his name on my screen and could not bring myself to answer. It rang again, then again. Finally, I pressed accept. "Mom," he said, sounding breathless. "Why is Claire Mendez calling my agent?" I looked out at the rehab center courtyard. 2 sparrows were hopping along the wet railing outside. The world had not changed, and yet nothing felt the same. "Your agent?" I said. He went quiet. Then he sighed heavily, as if I had disappointed him. "You know what I mean. Brent called me. He said you're claiming you don't know anything about the sale." "I don't know anything about a sale because I did not agree to a sale." "Mom, please don't do this." "Do what?" "Make this into something ugly. I was trying to help you." "By listing my house? You cannot stay in that house forever. You just had surgery. You can barely walk." "I am recovering." "You need support." "I have support. I do not need you to sell my home." His voice hardened. "Lauren and I talked about this. We thought you would understand once you had time to think it through." "You and Lauren talked about my house?" "We talked about your future." "No," I said. "You talked about what you could get from my future." For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then Michael said, "You have no idea what kind of pressure we're under." I believed him. That was the saddest part. I believed he was under pressure. I believed he was afraid of losing his job again. I believed he was embarrassed that Lauren's business was failing. I believed he wanted more stability for Emma. But none of those things gave him the right to steal stability from me. "Michael," I said, "where is my deed?" "What?" "The deed from the blue box in my closet? Where is it?" His breathing changed. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Do not lie to me." "I did not take your deed." "Then why were you in my house yesterday while strangers were touring it?" "I was checking on things." "You were checking on things for people you were trying to sell my home to." "Mom, you are confused." There it was. The sentence I had feared without knowing it. Not angry. Not apologetic. Not even defensive. Just a label. You are confused. He had used it because it was useful. He had used it because if I was confused, then he could become the reasonable one. The concerned son. The man who had stepped in while his aging mother could not understand what was best for her. I sat straighter in my chair. I may be recovering from surgery. I said, but I am not confused. His tone became softer again. You don't want this to become a legal mess? I didn't create a legal mess. You could ruin everything for us. I looked at the rainwater gathering along the courtyard curb. No, Michael, you did that yourself. Then I ended the call. I cried after that. Not loudly. Not for long. I cried because the boy I had carried to school in a yellow raincoat had learned to look at me and see an obstacle between himself and money. But I also cried because I finally understood that I could not protect him from the consequences of what he had chosen. Later that evening, Claire called with an update. She had reached the real estate broker, who was deeply concerned. Brent Harlow had told the brokerage that Michael had presented what appeared to be valid authority to act for me. He had also claimed I was too fragile to handle calls while in rehabilitation. But Claire had asked a question that made the broker pause. Did Mr. Clark ever tell you that his mother had refused to sign papers at the rehab center? The answer was no. Then another fact emerged. Michael had not been the person who first contacted Brent. Lauren had. She had sent an email 2 weeks before my surgery, asking whether a home could be listed on behalf of an elderly owner if the family had power of attorney. 2 weeks before I ever entered the hospital. 2 weeks before Michael brought that envelope to my room. 2 weeks before anyone could honestly claim they were suddenly worried about whether I could manage on my own. Claire forwarded the email to me. I read it 3 times. Then I noticed one line at the bottom. Lauren had signed her name and included a business email address I recognized from her online boutique. The address was connected to Willow Crest Holdings, the same company that had submitted the preliminary title request, the same company waiting in the background of the sale. And suddenly, I knew this had never been only about getting me out of my house. My son and daughter-in-law had been preparing to use it for something far bigger than a sale, something they could not afford to lose. Claire asked me to forward her every email, message, and document I had received from Michael or Lauren during the past 6 months. At first, that request seemed impossible. I had hundreds of messages, grocery lists, photos of Emma's school projects, Michael asking whether I wanted him to bring soup, Lauren sending links to cardigans she thought I would like. But then I began to read them differently. I was no longer looking at them as a mother trying to interpret her family generously. I was looking for a timeline. The first strange message came from Lauren in October. She had asked if I still had homeowners insurance through the same company. At the time, I answered without thinking. I told her yes. And she replied with a smiling face emoji and said she was just curious. A week later, Michael asked whether I had ever updated my will after William died. Then, in early November, Lauren asked if I had considered adding a transfer on death deed to the house to make things less complicated later. I had replied that my will was private and my affairs were in order. She had not argued. That was what made it worse. They had simply moved on to another path. Claire and her legal assistant built a file from those messages. They placed dates beside the email Lauren had sent to the real estate agent. They matched it with the false power of attorney. Then they placed the rehabilitation visitor log beside the day Michael had brought me the envelope. The pattern became impossible to ignore. Michael and Lauren had begun planning before my surgery. They had waited until I was physically vulnerable. They had tried to get a real signature first. When I refused, they used a false one. But Willow Crest Holdings was still the piece we did not understand. Claire searched Ohio business records, and discovered that Willowcrest Holdings was registered to a postal box in Columbus. The listed manager was a man named Curtis Vane. That name meant nothing to me. It meant something to Claire. Curtis Vane has been involved in several private real estate lending companies. She told me. Not all of them have been accused of wrongdoing. But the structure is familiar. Investors advance money to people who need cash quickly. The property becomes the leverage. Did Michael borrow money from them? We don't know yet. But the answer came 2 days later. It came from Emma. My granddaughter called me from the hallway outside her school library. "Grandma," she whispered, "are you mad at Dad?" My heart tightened. "No, sweetheart. I'm hurt by some choices he made. But I'm not mad at you." She was quiet for a moment. "Mom and Dad were fighting last night." "About what?" I wasn't supposed to hear. "That's all right. You don't have to tell me anything you're uncomfortable sharing." She took a breath. "They were talking about Uncle Curtis." I sat very still. "Did they say his last name?" "Vane." "Mom said he wasn't really her uncle," she said, calling him that made Dad feel better. "What did they say about him?" Emma's voice grew smaller. "Dad said if the house sale fell apart, Curtis would take the money from their savings. Mom said there wasn't enough savings left." I felt something cold move through me. "Emma, did you hear why they owed him money?" "No." "Dad said something about inventory and an investment. Then Mom said they only needed your house to close before the end of the month." I closed my eyes. I wanted to protect her from this. I wanted her to be a child who did not know the word debt could turn a home into a target. But I also knew I had to be careful. "Emma," I said gently, "you did nothing wrong by calling me? I want you to promise me one thing. Do not argue with your parents about this. Do not tell them you called. Just focus on school and stay safe. All right? Are they going to lose our house?" "I don't know yet. But I will make sure no one takes mine." When I told Claire about the call, she did not ask Emma to repeat it. She did not involve her in anything. She simply noted the information and began looking more closely at Curtis Vane's companies. What she found was enough to explain the urgency. Michael had signed a private loan agreement 4 months earlier through a company connected to Curtis. He had used his car, Lauren's remaining boutique inventory, and a future share of anticipated family property proceeds as collateral. That phrase made Claire's jaw tighten. Anticipated family property proceeds. She repeated. He listed your house as if it were already his future asset. The loan was for $48,000. Part of it had paid overdue rent, credit cards, and car bills. But most of it had gone into Lauren's boutique. She had ordered a large amount of seasonal inventory, expecting an online advertising campaign to bring in customers. The campaign failed. The merchandise sat in storage. The payments kept coming. Michael and Lauren had not been looking for a place for me to live. They were trying to turn my home into the exit door from their own financial disaster. And they had done it before I was even finished learning how to climb a staircase again. Claire sent a preservation letter to the real estate brokerage and the title company. She asked them to retain all emails, messages, phone notes, identification copie, and upload logs connected to the listing. Then she contacted the county detective assigned to financial crimes referrals. The detective's name was Naomi Bell. She did not arrive with flashing lights or a dramatic announcement. She met Claire and me in a quiet conference room at the rehabilitation center. She wore a plain navy blazer and carried a legal pad. She listened. She asked questions. She examined the signature on the false power of attorney beside my driver's license signature and old tax documents. She reviewed the notary information. She asked about the missing deed. Then she asked a question no one else had asked me. "Mrs. Clark, did your son ever have access to copies of your identification?" "Yes," I said slowly. He helped me replace my driver's license 2 years ago after I misplaced my wallet. Did he have access to your mail? He picked it up sometimes when I traveled to visit my sister, and he had a key to my house. Detective Bell nodded. Forgery cases often depend on access and intent. You have both concerns here, but we need to build this carefully. I appreciated that she did not pretend it would be easy. By then, I had learned to distrust easy assurances. 3 days later, the title company discovered something important in its electronic upload records. The image of my driver's license used in the sale file had been scanned from a copy, not photographed from the original. The listing paperwork had been uploaded from an internet address connected to Michael and Lauren's townhouse, and the false power of attorney had been created from a template downloaded 2 days after Michael visited me with the unsigned documents. The date was there. The time was there. The trail was there. All the things Michael had hoped would disappear into the confusion of my surgery were sitting quietly inside computer records. When Claire showed me the report, I stared at the page for a long time. I kept thinking maybe there was some explanation. I said. Claire looked at me with deep sadness. Rebecca, an explanation is not the same thing as an excuse. That sentence stayed with me. Michael had an explanation. He was drowning in debt. He was ashamed. He was afraid. He had convinced himself that if the house sold, I would still be cared for somehow. But an explanation did not transform a forged signature into concern. It did not give him the right to call me confused, because I refused to surrender the one thing William and I had spent a lifetime building. My release date from rehab came at the beginning of April. I could walk with a cane by then. Slowly, carefully, but on my own. Evelyn drove me home. Claire had arranged for a locksmith to meet us there. Officer Reed was also present, not because anyone had been arrested yet, but because the missing documents and disputed access had made the situation tense. When Evelyn's car turned onto Willow Lane, my house looked exactly as it always had. The maple tree was beginning to bud. My porch railings needed paint. The tulips William had planted years ago were pushing green leaves through the soil along the front walk. For 1 second, I nearly cried from relief. Then I saw the for sale sign lying face down beside the garage. Someone had removed it after the brokerage suspended the listing. But they had not taken it away. It looked like a message left behind. I walked up the porch steps one at a time. The locksmith changed every exterior lock. He rekeyed the side door, the basement door, the back door, and the front door. He installed a small camera at the porch entrance. When he handed me the new key, it was cool and solid in my palm. I had never imagined a key could feel like a boundary. Michael arrived before we were finished. His truck pulled up hard against the curb. Lauren was in the passenger seat. Neither of them got out at first. Then Michael stepped onto the sidewalk. "Mom," he said. I stood at the edge of my porch, with my cane in one hand and the new key in the other. Claire was beside me. Officer Reed stood near the driveway. Evelyn was behind the screen door, watching everything with the quiet attention of someone who had seen too much already. Michael looked at all of them and then back at me. "You brought the police to your own house?" "No," I said. "You brought this situation to my house." Lauren got out of the truck. Her face was pale, but her voice was sharp. "You have no idea what you're doing. You're destroying our family over a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding is forgetting to return a borrowed dish," I said. "This was a forged power of attorney and an unauthorized sale." Michael stepped closer. "I was going to tell you." "When?" "After everything was settled. After my house was sold. After we found you a place. A good place." I looked at him. "A place I did not choose. Paid for with money you planned to take from me." "It wasn't like that." "Then tell me what it was like." He could not. Lauren tried instead. "We were under pressure. Curtis was threatening us. We thought we could pay him back, get the boutique stable, and then make sure you were comfortable somewhere easier to manage. You thought you could decide where I lived. I said. We thought you needed help. No. You thought my age made me easier to control. Michael's face twisted. That isn't fair. I felt my knee ache, the old kind of ache that came when I had been standing too long. But I did not sit down. Fair would have been asking me for help. Fair would have been telling me the truth about the loan. Fair would have been admitting you were in trouble before you used my recovery as an opportunity. He looked at the new locks. Are you really shutting me out? Yes, I said. That word hurt, but it did not shake. I am your mother. I will always care what happens to you. But caring about you does not mean giving you access to my home, my records, or my decisions. Not after this. Lauren began to cry. For a moment, I almost softened. Then I remembered the email she had sent before my surgery. I remembered the line about listing a home on behalf of an elderly owner. I remembered that she had already been planning while she smiled at me across my dinner table. Claire stepped forward and told them all communication would go through her office. Detective Bell had opened an investigation based on the documents, the false notary information, and the electronic records. Neither Michael nor Lauren was to enter my property or contact me directly. Michael looked at me one last time. I never wanted to hurt you. I believed part of him meant it. But wanting to avoid the pain of hurting someone is not the same as choosing not to hurt them. You did hurt me, I said. Now you have to face what you did. He got back in the truck. I watched them drive away until the red taillights disappeared beyond the corner. The investigation lasted months. There were interviews, documents, digital records, statements from the title clerk, the real estate brokerage, the rehabilitation center, and the notary office. The false power of attorney was never accepted as valid. The sale was permanently canceled. The title company confirmed that no transfer of ownership had occurred. Claire helped me record additional protections on the property and update my estate plan. I named Evelyn as my emergency contact and gave Claire clear written instructions for any future legal matter. Michael and Lauren eventually accepted a plea arrangement related to the forged documents and attempted fraudulent sale. I will not pretend that result made me happy. There is no joy in seeing your child sit in a courtroom and admit he betrayed you. But there was relief in hearing the truth spoken plainly. Michael was ordered to repay the legal costs I had incurred. He was required to complete financial counseling and community service. Lauren faced consequences as well for her role in preparing and sending the documents. Curtis Vane's loan company was investigated separately. I do not know every detail of what happened after that, and I did not need to. My responsibility was to protect my home and tell the truth about what had been done to me. Months passed before Michael wrote me a letter. It was not an excuse this time. It was an apology. He wrote that he had spent years blaming everyone else for his failures. He said he had convinced himself that the house would be his someday anyway. So using it early did not feel like stealing. Then he wrote a sentence that broke my heart. I stopped seeing you as my mother and started seeing you as an asset. I read that line several times. Then, I put the letter in a drawer. I did not throw it away. But I did not rush to forgive him, either. Forgiveness is not a door that opens because someone knocks once. It is a road. And sometimes, the person who caused the harm has to walk a long way before you know whether they mean to stay on it. A year later, I invited Michael to meet me at a coffee shop. Not my house. Not yet. He looked older, more tired. But he listened when I spoke. And he did not interrupt. I told him he could have a relationship with me only if it was built on honesty, respect, and clear boundaries. There would be no key to my home, no access to my records, no conversations about my will, my money, or what he believed he deserved. He agreed. Time will tell whether he keeps that agreement. But I no longer live in fear of what he might do behind my back. Every morning, I open my own front door with my own key. I walk slowly down the porch steps, past the maple tree William planted, and I look at the house we built together. It is still mine. Not because I won an argument, because I finally understood that dignity sometimes means saying no to the people you love when they ask you to disappear for their convenience. If Rebecca's story moved you, please subscribe, like this video, and share it with someone who needs to remember that age never takes away the right to make your own decisions. And tell me in the comments, can a family rebuild trust after a betrayal like this? Or are some boundaries meant to remain forever?